looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris meets with Philippine President Marcos today during a visit to the Southeast Asian nation aimed at boosting ties and countering China's growing regional clout. Thai firms have expressed interest in investing in the Philippines, particularly in the areas of infrastructure, transportation, tourism, and food security. Vice President Kamala Harris told Asian leaders that the U.S. is committed to the region for the long haul, rejecting doubts about its engagement as China expands its clout. And rival Malaysian political blocs today tried to woo smaller parties to form a coalition government after the weekend's general election that saw major gains by a conservative Islamist party. First in our news, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris met with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos today during a visit to the Southeast Asian nation aimed at boosting ties and countering China's growing regional clout. Harris is the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit Manila since Marcos took power in June, signaling a growing rapport between the longtime allies after years of frosty relations under President Duterte. Let's listen in.
We continue to progress, that we continue to strengthen, and as we redefine those relationships. So your visit is a very strong symbol that these relationships remain strong, and that these relationships remain important, as indeed they do. So that is the Filipino. I have said many times, I do not see a future for the Philippines that does not include the United States. In the political sense, defense, security, I cannot think of an area where we have not cooperated, collaborated, and have had good results for both our countries.
The relationship between the Philippines and the United States is a long and enduring one. It is a relationship that is strong for so many reasons. It is the long-standing relationship in terms of the people-to-people ties. As you and I have discussed, I come from California. We have a thriving Filipino-American community there. And in fact, in the United States, by last count, there are at least 4 million Filipino-Americans. Yeah. Our relationship is based on mutual commitment to the economic prosperity of the region and our respective nations. And during the conversation that we have today, we will talk more about what that means in terms of the opportunities that are presented through our mutual concern about the climate crisis and what we might do in terms of investments in renewable energy and thinking about clean power. Our relationship is based on mutual concerns about security for the region. We are both proud members of the Indo-Pacific, and in particular, as it relates to the Philippines, I will say that we must reiterate always that we stand with you in defense of international rules and norms as it relates to the South China Sea. An armed attack on the Philippines' armed forces, public vessels, or aircraft in the South China Sea would invoke U.S. mutual defense commitments. And that is an unwavering commitment that we have to the Philippines. When we think about what is happening in this region, we know that there are so many opportunities for us to continue to strengthen our relationship. But the basis of our relationship is based on mutual commitments to international rules and norms, and upholding those international rules and norms in all of the ways that we know allow for, again, prosperity and security for our respective nations and the region. So again, I will reiterate that the alliance between the United States and the Philippines is a strong one, an enduring one, and only under your leadership continues to be strengthened. and we look forward to working with you on many of these issues. And I, of course, bring you greetings from President Joe Biden.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Vice President. Please do.
Now, the Vice President also met with her Philippine counterpart, Vice President Sara Duterte. VP Harris also announced that the U.S. and the Philippines are initiating talks on a civil nuclear cooperation deal. Once in force, this agreement will allow U.S. companies to export nuclear equipment, creating significant new commercial opportunities for the U.S. private sector, and also help the Philippines develop its energy security and transition to clean energy. Last March, the Philippines and U.S. signed a memorandum of understanding seeking to enhance nuclear cooperation between the two countries. And the United States will help Thailand develop nuclear power through a new class of small reactors, part of a program aimed at fighting climate change, according to Vice President Kamala Harris, announcing this on a visit to Thailand on Saturday. The White House said the assistance was part of its Net Zero World Initiative, a project launched at last year's Glasgow Climate Summit, in which the U.S. partners with the private sector and philanthropists to promote clean energy. Thailand does not have nuclear power, with the public mood on the issue souring after the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan. The White House said it would offer technical assistance to the Southeast Asian country to deploy the developing technology of small modular reactors, which are factory-built and portable. Such reactors are generally considered safer, as they don't need human intervention to shut down in emergencies. U.S. rivals China and Russia, as well as Argentina, are also developing small modular reactors, the prototypes of which are in the design phase. The White House didn't give a timeline, but said it would support Thailand, which is highly vulnerable to climate change, in its goal of going carbon neutral by 2065. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris also told Asian leaders that the U.S. is committed to the region for the long haul, rejecting doubts about its engagement as China expands its clout. Addressing a summit in Bangkok, Vice President Harris called the U.S. a proud Pacific power and said that the long-standing U.S. network of security alliances has allowed Asia to prosper. Take a look.
As a member of the Indo-Pacific, America has a profound stake in the future of this region. Commerce between the United States and the Indo-Pacific supports millions of American jobs. We have, then, a shared commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. And the United States has historic bonds and common values with the nations and the people of this region. All of this to say, the United States is here to stay.
Vice President Harris also insisted that economic partnerships in Asia were a top priority for the Biden administration and pointed out that the U.S. private sector invests around $1 trillion a year in the region.
Our message is clear. The United States has an enduring economic commitment to the Indo-Pacific, one that is measured not in years, but in decades and generations. And there is no better economic partner for this region than the United States of America. Under President Biden, we have seen an unprecedented expansion of ties between the United States and ASEAN. Hundreds of millions of dollars in assistance and new initiatives across 3 leader summits, including last week in Cambodia. For example, in Tokyo earlier this year, President Biden launched the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, also known as IPEF, a community of economies representing 40% of global GDP dedicated to equitable growth and high environmental and labor standards. IPEF members have committed to work toward concrete agreements on fair trade, resilient supply chains, clean energy, and countering corruption. Under IPAF, our administration is also working toward a digital trade agreement to provide common international rules and norms on data flows, on privacy, and e-commerce.
In tonight's other news, Thai firms have expressed interest in investing in the Philippines, particularly in the areas of infrastructure, transportation, tourism, and food security. Mr. Kring Krai Thinakul, chairman of the Federation of Thai Industry, said Saturday, in this current situation, it's necessary to revitalize the economic sector, especially the focus on sustainable development. And we have the same goal to focus on the joint development of public health, especially in the ASEAN framework, the development of the digital economy, the use of the digitalization, and implementation of BCG model in revitalizing the economy. He also said we are ready to support, invest in food security and infrastructure such as transportation and promoting tourism with the Philippines to enhance the business sector for mutual expansion between the two countries in the future. In a statement on Sunday, the Office of the Press Secretary said Mr. Thinakul made this commitment in a roundtable conference with Thai business leaders and Philippine economic managers and officials in Bangkok, Thailand. Through stronger partnerships between the Philippines and APEC and in Thailand, the Thai business leader said the two countries can work together to bolster economic growth, especially amid similar problems faced by both Asian economies, including the impact of climate change on the supply chain, the pandemic, and global political instability. Meanwhile, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry President George Barcelon said Thai firms are also keen on investing in energy and telecommunications, which President Marcos Jr. mentioned during his meetings with Thai businesses. Let's listen in.
It was mentioned that they are optimistic about the growth in the Philippines, and like other parties concerned, the Thailand group that has investment in our country in Mariwasa, MUPPC, which is making factories. He also expressed that the way things are moving, that the growth is going to be there, and they will also look into that. And one of the companies has already been in the Philippines for decades, in the power sectors. And he's very well aware that there's a need for power, of which in passing President BBM also mentioned that President did mention about the PPP, a public-private partnership, and that should give the various sectors impetus to invest more with the PPP program.
According to the palace, the meeting with Thai businesses is part of Marcos's bid to woo investments and strengthen economic cooperation between the Philippines and its ASEAN neighbors. Last Wednesday, President Marcos divulged that he will be deploying agriculture officials to initiate exploratory talks with Thai conglomerate CP Group. At a dinner meeting between President Marcos and CP Group's officials in Thailand, executives of the largest private company in Thailand expressed interest in increasing their investment in the country's agriculture sector. CP Group currently has $2 billion worth of investments in the Philippines. Meanwhile, in their first face-to-face bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the AELM, President Marcos and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese affirmed their commitments in advancing Philippine-Australian relations. The President identified agriculture and renewable energy as areas of cooperation that should be strengthened. On regional security, the Chief Executive recognized Australia's ongoing development and security partnerships in the region. He also stressed the need to have a strong partnership with the continental state as the region faces an evolving security landscape affected by the situation in the Korean Peninsula, tensions in the Taiwan Strait, and geopolitical rivalry. And for his part, the Prime Minister, Albanese, emphasized that Australia's unwavering support for ASEAN centrality, including its central role in upholding regional stability and prosperity. He also thanked the Philippines and ASEAN for playing a positive role in the recent release of Australia's Australian Sean Turnell from detention in Myanmar. The meeting between the two leaders followed their introductory phone call on November 7 and the ASEAN-Australia Summit on November 12 in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Albanese thanked the Philippines for the vibrant and growing Filipino community in Australia, as well as their contributions to his country's economy and culture. Meanwhile, President Marcos Jr. and Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern likewise compared views on regional issues of mutual interest in their introductory meeting, still on the sidelines of the AELM. The two leaders emphasized their country's shared commitment to the rule of law, including the promotion of regional peace and security. Ardern expressed her support for the Philippine position on the South China Sea or West Philippine Sea and for the ongoing negotiations for a code of conduct in the maritime dispute. Both affirmed the excellent bilateral relations in various areas of cooperation. In particular, the President acknowledged the development cooperation between the Philippines and New Zealand in agriculture, innovation, and peace building. And for her part, the Prime Minister highlighted the strong people-to-people links between the two countries, as she noted the invaluable socio-economic contribution of the Filipino community in New Zealand. They also acknowledged the great potential for growth in all aspects of two-way ties. While noting the steady pace of growth for bilateral trade, President Marcos said he would like to see a more balanced trade in the coming years. The chief executive thanked the Prime Minister for welcoming and hosting the growing diaspora of Filipinos in New Zealand, now numbering 80,000. The two also agreed to strengthen the multifaceted partnership between the Philippines and New Zealand while further promoting high-level and working-level engagements in regional and multilateral frameworks. Meanwhile, President Marcos had a Filipino community meet and greet in Thailand, and he said the establishment of a new Philippine Overseas Labor Office, or POLO, in the Southeast Asian nation would help in the promotion and protection of the rights and welfare of Filipinos in the kingdom. There are more than currently 30,000 Filipinos in Thailand, and mostly are working as English teachers and as employees in the kingdom's hospitality industry. He also talked about collaborating with Thailand in the agriculture industry. Here's a report from Cristel Di Marucot.
Members of different Filipino communities in Thailand gathered in a hotel in Bangkok Saturday to meet President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and his delegates after the APEC Economic Leaders Week. The attendees were amused by original Filipino music sang by OFWs working in entertainment industry. The venue was filled with PBBM and Vice President Sara Duterte Uniteam's campaign jingles, in which the crowd sang along with cheerfully. President Marcos Jr. arrived with Philippine delegates in the APEC summit. In his speech, he reiterated the positive bilateral meetings he had during the summit and encouraged OFWs to explore the agriculture sector, in which Thailand is in a strong position.
Dito sa Thailand, Thailand has long been labeled, ang tawag dito is kitchen of the world. Dahil sa kanilang natural resources, magandang weather, at saka yung kanilang year-round yung growing season nila, kaya napakaganda ng kanilang agrikultura. Number 13 ang Thailand sa global food exporter, tapos pang-apat sa Asia. Kaya nilalayo natin lalo pang pagitingin ang ating kooperasyon ng kaharian ng Thailand, lalo na sa larangan ng agrikultura. Ito rin ang ating itinaguyod sa ating mga pagpupulong sa mga pinuno ng mga bansa sa ASEAN region at sa kaugnayang mga bansa nang ako ay dumalo naman sa Cambodia para sa ASEAN Summit. Sa atin, ang pagpapaunlad ng ating agrikultura ang isang kritikal na layunin upang tayo ay maging mas matatag o yung tinatawag na resilient. Lang kami, meron kaming meeting kanina, mga nasa agriculture at yung pinapakita nila sa amin ay sabi namin kung madala natin sa Pilipinas ito, yung ganyang klaseng problema ay dahil hindi na tayo nag-i-import. Ang nagiging problema, nag-i-import tayo sa Pilipinas ng pagkain. So, Kung saan ang pinanggalingan ng pagkain, may inflation doon, tumaas ang presyo. Na-import din natin yung inflation na yun. Na-import din natin yung presyong yun. Kaya babawasan natin ang importation, titibayin natin yung ating sariling mga agrikultura, ang ating sariling mga negosyo, upang kung sakali man, ay sana naman ay hindi mangyari, ngunit kung sakali man ay magkaroon ulit ng krisis ng pandemya, krisis na kagaya sa Ukraine, ay tayo naman ay nakahanda na kaya natin pakainin ang ating mga kababayan.
He also mentioned that Philippine Overseas Labor Office, or POLO, will be established in Thailand soon. President Marcos Jr. ended his speech with gratitude to the Filipino community in Thailand for the support to the administration.
Naging beneficiary ng inyong kahit pagsakripisyo at pagsakripisyo na umalis sa ating bansa, na hindi nyo nakikita ang inyong mga pamilya, yung mga anak, dahil lang naghahanap kayo ng trabaho, ay kami nagpapasalamat sa ibinibigay ninyo, sa inyong ginagawa, binibigay ninyong tulong at pinapatingkad ninyo ang pangalan at reputasyon ng mga Pilipino sa buong mundo. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
Masaya ang lahat dahil na-meet namin siya in person. At kaming mga OFW dito sa Thailand ay aasa na lahat ng sinabi niya sa amin ay matutupad. Hindi man ngayon pero sa mga darating na panahon. At the same time, ang lahat ng gurong Pilipino dito sa Thailand ay mabigyang pansin, lalo na dun sa aming mga hinihiling na mga solusyon sa aming problema.
From Bangkok, Thailand, I am Crystal Dimarukot, and we live in extraordinary times.
And at the APEC CEO Summit in Thailand, President Marcos said food security, health and climate change represent three of the most important challenges the globe is facing. He also said international prosperity can only be achieved if there is peace in the region and the world. Crystal Mapa reports from the APEC Summit in Bangkok.
President Marcos Jr. brought to a bigger venue his call to assist the sector to recover in the post-pandemic era. He has raised before world leaders three serious global problems critical to rapid economic recovery. These issues are food security, global health systems, and climate change. Here's President Marcos during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation CEO Summit.
First, food security is a serious global problem. This is felt by every household, by every family, by everyone. The issues that the world faces now, from climate change to inflation to war, are viewed by the ordinary Filipino through the lens of food security. Steep declines in agricultural output and productivity, from widespread damage to farms and to crops, have been increasing, and they are linked to climate change, which has made extreme weather events such as unpredictable typhoons and severe droughts more frequent and more deadly. The rise in commodity prices, coupled with supply chain disruptions and inflationary pressures, have obviously contributed to the rising prices of food. And the current conflict between two of the world's largest agricultural producers has led to a scarcity of grains and fertilizers felt painfully across the globe. Food security must be a top priority for all governments. The global economy simply cannot afford another crippling series of lockdowns and travel bans. Governments must continue to invest in pandemic preparedness and in ensuring the resilience of a global health system.
He also said that climate change was the most pressing existential challenge of our time.
The Philippines is among the countries at great risk from this crisis, as we stand to lose more than up to 6% of our GDP annually by 2100, according to a study by the ADB. Global agreements that seek multilateral and multinational solutions to the climate crisis, particularly the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, are there and they are in force. But not enough progress has actually been made as emissions continue to rise. The Conference of the Parties, the COP27, is in full swing, but stronger action is required. Diversification into renewables and other sources is imperative. And to this end, the Philippines has prioritized hydrothermal, geothermal, solar power, wind power, as well as other low-emission energy sources. By setting a target for 35% renewable energy in the power generation mix by 2030 and 50% by 2040.
He also pledged that the Philippine government will work closely with the private sector to improve the resilience of people and businesses by leveraging the tools of sustainability, such as innovative supply chain systems, circular economy models for recycling and upcycling, including the Biocircular Green or BCG economy model of APEC host Thailand. He also called on members of APEC to become instruments of peace and innovation to ensure international prosperity.
Because prosperity and progress is only possible in a world that is at peace, because we, as nations of the world, can never achieve our fullest potential unless we do it together. We must have our sights set high for APEC and for all member countries. But whatever plans we may have for our countries, for our economies, those will come to naught unless they are within the context of peace in the region and in the world.
Reporting from APEC Economic Leaders Week here in Bangkok, Thailand, I am Crystal Mapa. We live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, Thailand's Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha wrapped up the summit by giving a ceremonial Woven Shalom to U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris at the handover ceremony during the APEC summit in Bangkok. Crystal Mapa is back with this report.
The United States will serve as APEC host in 2023. Thailand's Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha handed the ceremonial Woven Shalom to U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris at the handover ceremony during the APEC summit in Bangkok. First, let's listen in.
Today, I am honored to hand over this shalom to the United States, our next APEC host, as a gift and a symbol of the strength, resilience, and the continuity of our cooperation. APEC is at a crossroads, and we must continue to remain solid and relevant in the ever-changing environment. Thailand is ready to work closely with the United States to ensure a seamless transition of APEC's work. I am confident that the issues of sustainability and inclusivity, as reflected in the Bangkok goals on BCG economy, which we have jointly laid a strong foundation, will be continued next year under the priorities of the United States' APEC host year. I trust that APEC is in good hands, and I wish you the very best as you embark on the journey for APEC 2023.
Ministers from the 21 APEC member economies issued a joint statement following the APEC ministerial meeting in Bangkok. APEC's joint ministerial statement describes collaborative actions to be implemented by member economies over the next year to advance the APEC's agenda in promoting trade and investment that is open to all opportunities, reconnects economies in all dimensions, and drives the region towards balanced, inclusive, and sustainable growth through approaches such as the Biocircular Green or BCG economy. Ministers, through the joint statement, welcomed the Bangkok goals on the BCG economy to be submitted for the endorsement of APEC leaders. Ministers reiterated their determination to deliver a free, open, fair, non-discriminatory, transparent, inclusive, and predictable trade and investment environment, as well as continue their efforts to keep supply chains functioning, secure, and resilient. Ministers welcomed the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific Agenda Work Plan, responding to leaders' commitments to take forward work on this agenda. Ministers thanked Thailand for hosting APEC in 2022 and welcomed the United States and Peru as the hosts of APEC in 2023 and 2024. Reporting from APEC Economic Leaders Week here in Bangkok, Thailand, I am Crystal Mapa. We live in extraordinary times.
Meanwhile, Thailand's economy enjoyed healthy expansion in the third quarter, according to officials today, with the return of international tourists, helping to offset persistently high inflation. Southeast Asia's second-largest economy was battered by the pandemic, but the kingdom's reopening earlier this year saw the service sector record an 87% year-on-year increase, according to official data. Thailand's Economic and Social Development Council recorded a 4.5% year-on-year rise in gross domestic product in July to September, projecting this year's overall growth at 3.2%, while forecasting 3 to 4% for next year. Thailand expects to generate around 570 million baht, or $15.8 billion in tourism revenue this year, according to officials, after welcoming some 10.2 million visitors since reopening, still down from the roughly 40 million pre-pandemic. Meanwhile, Asian markets fell today as China's first COVID death in 6 months sparked fears officials would reimpose strict, economically painful restrictions to fight outbreaks across the country. The news threw a spanner in the works for investors who had grown hopeful of a gradual reopening after Beijing eased a number of virus-fighting measures earlier this month. The death of an 87-year-old in Beijing on Sunday came as infections across this country spiked, testing authorities' plans to loosen their grip by lowering quarantine times for foreigners and canceling mass tests. Beijing has in recent days moved to confine some residents to their homes and ordered others to quarantine centers. The measures dealt a particular blow to Hong Kong's Hang Seng, which fell more than 2%, extending a sell-off at the end of last week and eating further into a recent massive rally. Shanghai was also down. And there were also losses in Tokyo, Sydney, Seoul, Singapore, Taipei, and Manila. Kuala Lumpur dropped with the ringgit after Malaysian elections ended with no clear winner, fueling uncertainty in the country. Meanwhile, a fraught UN summit wrapped up Sunday with a landmark deal on funding to help vulnerable countries cope with devastating climate impacts, but also anger over a failure to be more ambitious on cutting emissions. The two-week talks in Egypt's Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, which at times appeared to be too titter on the brink of collapse, delivered a major breakthrough on a fund for climate loss and damage. Take a look.
The floor. My friends, we heard the calls and we responded. Today, here in Sharm el-Sheikh, we established the first ever dedicated fund for loss and damage, a fund that has been so long in the making. Millions around the globe can now sense a glimmer of hope that their suffering will finally be addressed swiftly and appropriately.
Clearly, this will not be enough, but it is a much-needed political signal to rebuild broken trust. The voices of those on the front lines of the climate crisis must be heard.
Developing nations relentlessly pushed for the fund during the summit, finally succeeding in getting the backing of wealthy polluters, long fearful of open-ended liability. The fund will be geared towards developing nations that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change, language that had been requested by the EU. Finally, in our news, rival Malaysian political blocs today tried to woo smaller parties to form a coalition government after the weekend's general election that saw major gains by a conservative Islamist party. Take a look.
As a majority bloc, we have managed to get the support of MPs to form the government with a simple majority. Saying is we will form a government only when we have the majority. And it will certainly be stable. For the elections, I just told you, I'm going to claim to do so because we have.
Now, one of Southeast Asia's biggest economies saw 3 governments change in as many years before this stalemate, and the next one faces major challenges, including soaring inflation. No party has emerged with a clear majority. Veteran opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim and former Premier Muhyiddin Yassin both claim they have the numbers to control parliament. To break the impasse, parties have been told to submit their preferred prime minister and coalition partners to the King's Palace by 2 p.m. today. The bloc led by the United Malays National Organization, or UMNO, which once dominated Malaysian politics, trailed far behind the rest in Saturday's election. It was their worst election performance since Malaysia won independence in 1957. While details of possible alliances are murky, Muhyiddin's group includes the conservative Pan-Malaysian Islamic Party, which promotes a strict interpretation of Islamic law. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.